one of the speakers shared that this morning. Um, I would love if we could just share how was the resonance of this experience of connecting what we don't usually connect, coming back to ourselves and opening up ourselves to the other, and connecting this to the theme about learning sustainability, learning for sustainability, and how can we explore together new ways of learning for sustainability, understanding and growing a shared understanding of what sustainability is and what learning for sustainability means. So if whoever would like to share, please go ahead on the chat. But for a few of you, we probably don't have that much time. Ed, I'm here. I'm asking for your help here. But if you could just share the resonance. Is there anything that surprised you? Is there what is a feel that was in that sharing, in that making the safe place that yields life, creating conditions for life itself, or the expression of life itself? So
we have time, yeah, for just one person. If there is anybody that would like to share, then don't hesitate to do so, or to raise your hand and join in.
And if there's anything that was surprising, any feeling, any question, any resonance really about how was that sharing and connecting? We were learning sustainability, John said.
No, we are learning sustainably.
Sustainably, yes. Yeah. Thank you, Carlos.
I think, so I understand that as we keep on learning, right?
Yes. So what was that learning, John?
Maybe I could I just say that I think it's like saying education is preparation for life. Archbishop Tutu said, education is life itself. It's not preparation for anything. And I think when we put the word for in, we put the future out there, so we're not in it. And so I think we've got to learn sustainably, and maybe regeneratively, even more importantly than sustainably. Mm. But the resonance of everyone battling with the idea of how to bring the name into the room and connect with the others was beautiful, because there's vulnerability in that moment. And I think we learn most when we're vulnerable.
Yeah,
thank you, John.
Very good point. Very good point. So I think we have to shift to the second part of this session, to this discovery through examples brought to us by speakers. And to introduce the first speaker, let me share with you that 3 years ago in the Club of Rome, under the joint leadership of Mampela Rampele and Sandrine Dixon de Clève, we started sort of a revolution, a human revolution in a way, to use the expression coming from Aurelio Peccei, from the founder of the club. And that human revolution is questioning the foundations of what we take for granted, in particular in our cultures of modernity, in the Western cultures, in the cultures of rich, developed, quote unquote, developed countries. And doing that by connecting and listening very carefully to what other cultures say and how they see the world and our relationships among humans with life and with time. And particularly doing that by coming back to the mother continent and learning from African cultures, where the concept of relationships is so central. And quite naturally, we decided, even if it is a reduction, we decided to use the word Ubuntu to talk about what we are doing. And learning through Ubuntu as a representative of many more cultures and many more words, with the relationships at the core. And we even were crazy enough, myself together with John Gilmore, who is here, in writing an Ubuntu learning charter that we have shared with you in anticipation of this session. That was a bit crazy because very much as Karima suggested, Ubuntu is something which should be alive in our culture, not written in a piece of paper. But to talk about that much better than me, and with much more, actually with much more legitimacy than me, because she lives in that culture, she comes from that culture. We have with us Nolita Mvunelo, who is based in Cape Town and is a program manager at the Club of Rome since very recently. Nolita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Carlos. In the spirit of the session, I will start with sharing that my name, Nolita, which according to babynology.com means a unique light that brings life. And to my mother, in her own words, I am her light. My name links to sustainability to be just that, to be a light that brings life. And in today's context, it means I arrive in the circle as someone for whom how I relate to others is deeply linked to what I hope to ignite in them, for whom life and dignity of that life is most important. As Carlos said, the Ubuntu Learning Chart is a living document created by the Club of Rome Africa chapter that is an open invitation to all individuals to contribute with the intention to, one, address African challenges from African context free from a colonial mindset, realize that African wisdom has the potential to reconcile current knowledge with how life works, create the conditions for the emergence of many pathways to equitable human well-being within a healthy biosphere. The ideas of the UCN are not new. The charter itself recognizes that it builds on the Black consciousness movement as a strong source of inspiration. A quick search of the word Ubuntu will tell you that it's a Linux operating system. So please don't do that. Just scroll down a little bit. But Ubuntu in my native language, as I am Xhosa, can be elaborated as Untu Nguntu Ngabantu. This has been broadly translated to I am because we are. Although profound, this translation fails to thoroughly articulate the sentiment that a person is a person through others. The former connotates a symbiosis with the community, where the latter expands to a relational understanding, is that I am who I am through the people around me. And this can be difficult to absorb, sometimes counterintuitive, almost contradictory to the Western understanding of self, because how I was raised is that I am just who I am. And for many of us, it is a carefully crafted identity that highlights our best features and disguises our worst fears, our fears about the future, our ambitions for success, our mechanisms to protect ourselves from the worst storms. We work hard to build capital and have corporatized the work of saving the planet. Many of us are working to change a system that we're still working very hard to succeed in. And it's becoming increasingly evident that we won't be able to protect ourselves from the storms. Despite the end of the world, some problems may persist. And 2020 was the best example of that we are stuck. So what do we hope for? Well, some of us hope to save ourselves and the ones we care about. And the optimists among us hope that we will save everything that we hold dear. But what is important? Our fears gear us towards the preservation and resilience of the system we have already put so much personal stake in. In an emergency, we have shown to preserve ourselves and our nations before we even consider others. But what the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us is that our safety is through others. I am safe through the safety of others. I am who I am through the people around me. It seems that the pathway to getting unstuck is gesturing towards a reconciliation of our hopes and our fears. The reconciliation process is complex, and there's still a lot to learn about the systems that govern us. It makes learning and education a key component in this journey. As proposed by the Ubuntu Learning Charter, learning that is mutual, dynamic, circular, and self-reinforcing leads to new questions that allow a more creative and inclusive response to challenges. What then becomes critical is that we prioritize changing how we learn and to be honest in our questions, or we risk further minimizing Ubuntu to a slogan that can be co-opted by well-meaning individuals that want to quell our fears, knowing that whatever we hope for, we simply do not want enough. The strategy for change proposed by the UCN contextualizes learning around the central conflict to inform our day-to-day decisions. The first is to develop a strong sense of self, academic mastery, a spirit of generosity, and a healthy lifestyle and interdependence. Live and love, love and live with success, sound values, a contributor spirit, and a deep fulfillment in a constantly changing world. Unlock the ability to discover and develop vital creativity required for the capacity for appropriate self-regulation. Develop a sense of collaboration and teamwork, creativity and imagination, critical thinking, problem solving as vital components of our learning renaissance in the 21st century. Included in the strategy for change, the last factor would be to show yourself some grace. Like learning, fear can be self reinforcing and exacerbated by conventions, power, and inequality. We will not immediately be free from being stuck in the status quo. All in all, we should be curious, respectful, and brave. In the work that you do, ask yourself, will it strengthen my community? Is it collaborative? Does it sustain life? Is it empowering? And finally, will it grow life? Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Nolita. This is the second time I hear you after the session in the morning, and it was even better. So, by the way, to everybody, you will have access after the session to the recording. So maybe you are feeling now, I should have recorded this. Don't worry, it is being recorded. And you will have access to that as well as to the contents of the chat. Or what is being written in the chat will be accessible to you after that. So thank you so much, Nolita. Now we shift a little bit to the north, to that country which, according to Mampela, is almost Africa, but it is called Spain. And we have with us Lucia Gonzalez. Lucia is based in Spain, but she's I would say a social entrepreneur with a huge amount of energy, many projects. One of them is the Natives organization, and she's also doing part of her work takes place as well in Africa. But Lucia, please, the floor is yours. Feel free to share.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure sharing with you today.
Recording in progress.
This session. So, how to begin? I would like to say that my dream when I was very young was to change the world, and that's what I'm trying to do every day in any way I can imagine. And what I have learned in the last years is that the best way to inspire ourselves is to be really close with children and youth. This is my source of inspiration always comes with new generations. I prefer to call them present generations because they are not the future, but they are right now here with us. And we need really to take the opportunity to work for them, with them. I would like to stop in these two words for them because we owed it. I think we are really in debt with them. And I like to wake up every day saying I'm going to do my best to give them back what we have taken them, and with them because they are natives. They are sustainably native children and youth from the very beginning of their lives. They have the possibility and the ability to see the world, to see the different futures in so many different colors. And it's so great that it's natives and they have it in a natural way. And sometimes adults and so many organizations, public, private, everybody tries to find solutions for many different challenges. And we have them around us and they have the possibility to inspire us and to perhaps to share with us this innovation. So my purpose with natives was to work very closely with these new generations. We launched natives in 2020 from the ground. So we decided to work with more than 35 schools in 11 countries in the 4 continents and to understand how they were dealing with sustainability, what they were doing to learn for sustainability. And it was great to understand that there are so many different ways to do it. And all of them are complementary, all of them are correct, and all of them are great because what they have in common is that these schools that are already moving forward and learning and showing us how to do it, what they are doing is that they are focusing in their local communities. Sustainability, what I have learned with all these schools, is that only happens in the ground when you are really focusing in what you need, what is around you in your life, in your day-by-day life. So after working with these 45 schools, we said we need to propose this new purpose of education to many other different schools in the world. And then we came out with our safe space, but a digital space for learning. And we launched our platform, Natives, where today any school in the world can join our community and can learn from the other schools. So what we are doing is not saying, okay, you have to do it like this. We say we give you this digital space where you can learn, you can exchange with any other schools in the world that are right now learning, defining, implementing, and measuring impacts of real projects related with sustainability and regeneration. And the Native platforms today welcomes more than 70 schools all around the world. And it's fantastic to see how they do it on their own. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to implement. We don't need to implement complex processes, but the schools are really open and ready to be solidar and to share knowledge experience in between them. What we are doing right now in our third step of our project of Native is coming back to the physical spaces. We are proposing, our new project from Natives is to propose, in this case, safe physical spaces to reconnect with nature. We have seen that many schools in the world are located in urban environments, and for them it's very difficult to have a real experience of how to deal and how to be, to feel again part of the nature. So we are launching a new project where these schools located in cities can come to these natural spaces where they can bring their projects, they can define them, and they can experiment in connection with nature. So we are in the same spirit and mission of the learning platform, Learning Planet. We are always thinking of how to bring spaces where education happens, where this community, learning community is much bigger than only a single school, but that can happen in many different ways in many different places, and where collaboration and sharing between schools, between teachers, between students is the most important vector of what is happening. And I can assure you what I have been experimenting these 2 years is that sustainability happens, really happens in so many different ways. And it's incredible how children and youth show us that the future is multiple choice future, where sustainability is on the basis of it, but the future of these local communities are different because they have different ways of understanding life, of culture, languages, etc. But all of them are great, and we can learn from each other. So for me, a great experience, and ready to share everything with anybody that is interested in doing and giving this chance to their schools, their communities, where we can really demonstrate that sustainability happens in real way, and you can feel it, you can see it, you can speak about it, you can experiment it, and you can feel it with the 5 senses that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucia. This point you made about coming back to physical spaces and to reconnect with nature, it sounds critical right now that we hear so much about the digital space, and the role of digitalization, and such an uncritical perspective of what does it mean, while we actually need to reconnect with life. Let's call it that way, life with a capital L. As I said in the beginning of the session, I think we should listen to people on the ground, to people in places in distress, dispossessed, marginalized people who have no other option but to learn, provided some conditions are created for them to learn, to have the opportunity to learn. and leave behind their helplessness. I think this is exactly what John Gilmore has been doing for more than 15 years with the LEAP schools in South Africa. So John, you're welcome to share your thoughts with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I work in South Africa, and we have a network of 6 LEAP schools working with children between the ages of 13 and 18, full-time schools. And we work only in communities which in our country are called townships and some rural spaces, with the lowest economic quintile, the underserved communities, who are destined to be another lost generation and have been destined for years and years and decades through colonial power and through apartheid history to be lost and simply provide a basic work service for the privileged. That was not sustainable and never will be. But the vestiges of that are now embedded in the economic system and in the mindsets and in the expectations. So for me, shifting to generative mindset is the critical element for the future. And the question is, how do we take people from the fixed mindset of the assumptions and of the imposed expectations, and what are the unlocking mechanisms? What are the triggers that allow for somebody who's not even contemplating change to go from pre-contemplation to contemplation and then action? And so I want to share with you what is the absolutely at the core of the work, which has produced 18 years of successful graduates from these communities, most of whom have gone on to university and graduated and are now qualified engineers, doctors, and so on, from spaces where they were not expected to be anything other than working in an unskilled workforce. It's simple. We have to talk to each other. We have to structure conversations, not transmissions of information. And for me, the big learning came through my embracing the spirit of Ubuntu, which says if we as a group sit down and talk to each other and connect, we will recognize that we are interconnected, as we've done today in our names. And we will recognize that not only are we interconnected, we're interdependent. And we have the same relationship with the natural order and every living creature and every living being. Once we recognize our own interconnectedness and interdependence, we can start developing the regenerative mindset that says, I grow things, I heal myself to be a healer, I work openly. So the construct is a circle. Children every day in our schools sit in a circle for at least 50 minutes and share. They check in with their most uncomfortable feelings. And the rule of the circle is you don't say what you think, you say what you feel. Now, I guarantee if we called that circle right now in this group, we would struggle because we've been so conditioned to think before we express our feelings. We overlay, even when we are asked the question, what are you feeling? We begin to process what's an appropriate answer, rather than dig right into the feeling and declare it. If we can liberate children to be able to be metacognitive, interactive, interdependent, not rugged individuals who tramp on each other to get to the top, not people who reinforced extrinsically all the time as achievers, but as young people who can embrace the idea that a hurt to one is a hurt to all. Your success is my success. Our success can create a regenerative community, a regenerative country, a regenerative continent. So it's a construct. The facilitator is in the circle as a participant. There is no room for observers. Everyone who walks into the circle is part of the healing circle. And we do those every day, 5 years of healing circles on a daily basis is what enables our children to master maths. And they're not talking about maths in those circles. They're talking about their mothers, their fathers, their anger, their feelings of internalized depression. And they are liberating themselves through difficult conversations. I was taught to avoid difficult conversations and to be risk averse in the area of feelings. In my privileged education, I was oppressed. And I embraced it because it came with privilege. I reject that now. And I want to be part of that liberation so that children can not live with the heaviness of being that goes with always trying to perform, and can live with the joy of always being creative and taking risks. That's what the leap is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for the warm sharing. So full of love. I see some signs of hearts. So full of love from you. Now we turn to Laureline Simon, French but based in Germany, but doing work with all over the world, and particularly in the global south, if I'm not wrong. So, or I don't like the expression the global south, but anyway. Laureline, please, the floor is yours. Share with us your feelings following John's advice and thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. I'm actually kind of I'm really moved by what John said. So
yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to speak now. I know.
I'm really moved. I thank you so much, John, for sharing this. So my name is Laureline Simon, as you said, and I've been working on climate change mitigation adaptation at the international level for about 15 years, including with big international organizations like the UN Climate Change Secretariat, who I supported international negotiation process in relation to adaptation to climate change. But I'm currently the founder and the director of One Resilient Earth, a nonprofit organization based in Bonn, Germany, and New York City. And our mission is to help build the long-term resilience of individuals, communities, and ecosystems to today's climate and ecological crisis through a regenerative and transdisciplinary approach that weaves together art, science, ancient wisdom traditions, and new technologies when relevant. And I'd like to tell you about the approach to learning that we have generated at One Resilient Earth over the past 2 years. So to start with, what's fascinating when we're working on the climate emergency and the 6th mass extinction is that those are recent global unfolding phenomena interacting with major social, technological, political, and financial events in unpredictable ways. And as a result, while nobody knows today what we will need to know to retain agency despite climate instability in an uncertain future world, nor what we will need to know to keep on sustaining or regenerating life on this planet. So consequently, we're likely to be experimenting, adapting, and learning continuously together in the decades to come, more or less intentionally. However, we feel it would be important that this intentional learning goes beyond acquiring, knowledge about new facts or tools or developing leadership skills. In our view, we would need to develop the practice to learn through all situations, events, the use of various disciplines, human interactions, emotions, or landscapes that we are part of or witness of, either individually or collectively. We believe that each one of us can become mindful of the opportunity to pause anytime, to reflect, question, start unlearning and relearning with different teachers again and again at our own rhythm. And through this process, we can start feeling and restoring our relationships to ourselves, to others, and nature. And this is also how we see resilience, this lifelong learning through experiences, repairing or regenerating what needs to be along the way and bouncing forward. To give you some examples, we run many different projects because this diversity is essential to grow our capacities to learn deeper through human and more than human interactions in various parts of the world. So we have an online magazine called Tero, through which one can learn, for instance, from virtual galleries of artworks of indigenous artists, snapshots into the world of Western digital artists or ecofeminist performers, as well as from free-flowing, deeply personal interviews with scientists or nature custodians. We also integrate contemporary art into scientific teachings to experiment and learn how to boost creativity in research while calling participants back into their bodies. We've done so in open lecture series with university in Bonn, or through a workshop on the future of healing with the Encourage Museum, in which we also mobilize futures literacy. And we support local communities striving to build their own long-term resilience to unavoidable climate change impacts by facilitating inclusive dialogues, as we did with a community in Atlantic Canada, or by mobilizing collaborators in multiple fields to respond to the specific resilience and regeneration needs of young women living in a refugee settlement in Uganda, for instance. And in the process of working with local communities, we're fully aware that we, as the team of One Resilient Earth, are learning immensely from the deep teachings of a Mi'kmaq elder in Atlantic Canada, or from the experience of the Meriki Bisimwaduzabe, a Congolese refugee running the Ramwanja Rural Foundation in Uganda, with whom we're collaborating. And last, we also run weekly climate circles for sustainability professionals and for youth, where we learn to listen to ourselves and others and support a community of people working daily to address climate change by sharing about our emotions, all our emotions, openly, and by practicing deep listening. So I could tell you about some other projects, but I'll stop there. And I just want to highlight that through all those projects, we strive to learn through experience how to best embody resilience and support regeneration in practice with our growing learning community.
Thank you so much, Laureline. Very interesting, in particular, the experience of shifting from the multilateral organizations to supporting work on the ground. I'm sure it's not so easy. Now we shift to the Americas, starting with. By the way, before I say the name of the next speaker, we will have some time for Q&A after the round of speakers is finished. So please, if you have, there are many comments in the chat, which is good. If you have particular questions to ask for this Q&A part of the session, please do that in the chat. It will be easier for us to use your questions and moderate them later. Luis Camargo, founder and director of Organización para la Educación y Protección Ambiental in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia. So now the whole session should shift to Spanish, but I mean, as a courtesy for many of you who don't speak that language, we will continue in the language, in the dominant language, English. But Luis, please share with us your feelings and your thoughts.
Gracias, Carlos. And I'm really happy to be here. So as Carlos said, I'm the founder and director of OPEPA, which is the Organization for Environmental Education and Protection. We've been working over 23 years in looking at ways to reconnect people to the earth, to accelerate the transition towards sustainable and regenerative cultures. And I'm really happy to have heard all the speakers up to now, because I find there's incredible resonance and synchronicity. So I would like to share with you an example of something that we lived a couple of years ago in a sustainability for education workshop directed to teachers. And these were all natural science teachers, because when we started doing these workshops, all the schools would only send natural science teachers for some reason. In the last couple of years, we've been able to shift that to teachers of all areas, which is really important. But with this group of teachers, we took on Bogota is a huge city, 10 million people, and we took them to the forest next to the city. So if you would walk 5 minutes, you would see this huge concrete mass. But within the forest, you were immersed in the forest. And this was a bit uncomfortable for some of the teachers just because we were changing the setting. But before even speaking of sustainability, we actually started speaking about something else. And we started opening the door to start feeling and speaking of relationships. And we focused on our relationships to ourselves, to others, and to nature. And we were asking very specific question on what disconnected you from yourself, from others, and from nature. And in the same way, what connected you? And this is something we've done in many scenarios around the globe. And we always hear the same responses. Fear disconnects, love connects. And for me, this is the essential, principle of education for sustainability. Because as we moved on with this group of teachers to talk about education for sustainability, it was evident to them, and they brought up something they were not expecting as they expressed to us. They were saying, sustainability is not about all the technical things that we always speak about. It's not about the SDGs. It's not about all these technocratic thoughts and, orientations we are trying to bring to students. But it's more about realizing the magic of our interrelated and interconnected nature as people, our capacity to feel our interbeing and to come into right relation at those three levels. So for me, this is one of the experiences that have brought, the essence. Sustainability cannot be a destination, I feel. Sustainability is only a stop in a long pathway towards birthing a regenerative way of living and acting on Earth. And in this process, we have discovered something that we repeat in our programs, which is a three-step system, if you want to call it a system. But the first thing we've realized with students and with adults is that it's fundamental to connect deeply with the earth and with life. And this has been mentioned in previous talks when we say we have to come back to the direct experience of nature. But connecting deeply with the earth and life is allowing ourselves to fall back in love. And this is critical. This is something that with the IUCN we're doing in the Nature for All program and is starting to emerge in many other spaces. But in falling back in love, we need to combine knowledge, direct experience, and touch, smell, our senses, and our emotions in order to generate the capacity to realize our interconnected and interdependent self. Once we establish that deep connection, we found that it is important to help students and people learn to sense what we call the visible and the invisible. And this is fundamental because in education, we have always focused only on the visible, on the parts, on the individualities, but we have forgotten the invisible, which is the energy transfers, the interactions, and the way things are related. So I call this the inters, because it's the interrelations, interdependencies, interconnectedness, and interactions of all things around us. Because that's how the complexity actually really arises. And that's how health becomes, we believe. So learning to sense the visible and the invisible is a fundamental part of it. And then at the end, once you're deeply connected and you're sensing the visible and the invisible, you can really activate your regenerative capacity. And in learning for sustainability, we find this is, the ultimate realization is activating our regenerative capacity so each individual can actually become part of creating the conditions for life to thrive together. Start acting in service to life. And in this, coming into right relation with ourselves, with others, and with nature. And I wanted to share this because I feel that if in any culture, if we strive to go in a common direction of coming into right relation with everything that's around us, with ourselves and with others, we can definitely find a lot of hope in a future that's emerging, that can become regenerative and that can thrive with all life in the planet. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Wow. Difficult to difficult to speak again after what you said. So inspiring. I see a lot of resonance also with what when you say learning to sense the visible and the invisible. There is a lot of resonance with what Karima Karawi does at Tamkin and the silent melody she speaks about. But also I love that you said fear disconnects, love connects. So for all the pretensions of rationalism and modernity, we have left our cultures, the dominant cultures, let's put them that way, the Western cultures, to be shaped more by our fears. Definitely cultures are shaped by emotions, but we have left them to be shaped by fears more than by love. So reversing that is essential. So many things, Luis. Still in the Americas, the last speaker in this round, but definitely not least, we have with us Kathleen Rogers, who is right now in Washington, D.C., and is the president of Earthday.org. So Kathleen, please, the floor is yours. Share your feelings and thoughts.
Thank you so much for asking me to join this panel. I'm so impressed. I am a confession. I'm not an educator, but rather a lawyer. And often that job requires me and all of us to be very precise and live within a box of laws and regulations. And certainly not less concerned about values, but not focused on it. But values are actually the very essence of loving and protecting nature, which often includes something much more emotional and is certainly value driven. But we need to take both into consideration when we're educating people and inspiring people, and if we're going to solve the climate crisis. I'm certainly inspired by the ideas and pathways for learning that our speakers have mentioned, but I'm taking a slightly different tack here and talking about the practical changes we're seeking in education to reach the goals, including those values and goals that Nolita and Lucia mentioned, very central to our campaign, and what John and everyone else said about the need to be creative and take risks and connect emotionally. And all of those things are desperately needed in this troubled and divided time. For 52 years, my organization's been in the very important field of non-formal education, and hundreds of millions of students, as a result of our work and many, many other people, almost 1 billion people take part of Earth Day every year in April. We've always felt that immersion in outdoor experiences in nature, and if you're stuck in a classroom, inspiration about our natural world, field trips, and the thousands of activities we've planned and created for over 50 years was going to be enough to inspire generation after generation to both love learning about the environment, to love nature, to understand solutions and problems, and that there would grow worldwide a natural affinity for all of this and the desire to protect our species and of course, each other. If only we could expose them to these ideas and experiences.
Please, there is somebody. Could you mute if you don't speak?
They're muted, Carlos. Yeah.
Okay, good. Go ahead. Sorry, Kathleen.
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yeah. And so we really deeply believe that generation after generation that Earth Day's been educating and exposing people to nature, as have thousands of other organizations, that we would create a generation after generation of people who had a natural affinity to everything. But increasingly, and I think the climate crisis has driven this, we feel that while many young people have been inspired, our capacity to reach students with short bursts of this sort of experiential and other learning isn't enough, and that our students are falling further and further behind worldwide in their capacity to see the earth, to be inspired by nature, and to feel a future, most important, that is equitable, green, and healthy, and prosperous, and to make them feel it's all within their grasp. Now, certainly, living within our means, living sustainably, and all of the things that are really important to us are critically important to Earthday, as they are with everybody on this call. But sometimes I'm afraid we ignore human nature. And so we want to sort of grasp with those complexities of being human and pushing forward and what progress means. And so Earthday's mission in all of that is to broaden the movement. And our goal is to educate and inspire not just those with the luxury to become environmentalists, but the middle class, the marginalized, the poor, and other groups and classes of young people who are not among those who enjoy elite educational experiences, that don't have the benefit of these extraordinary examples I've just heard today of learning and loving and caring. For sustainability has long belonged to the elite, but it can't anymore because climate change is reaching all of us. So at Earthday, after lots of consultations with so many groups and reaching back to our history of outdoor learning and explaining the benefit, values, and extraordinary nature of nature, we decided to expand our work and to create and work with a broad coalitions of millions of teachers through Education International and through trade unions and faith groups and NGOs and people who were in the line, first responders, you name it, organizations that would join together to push governments to formalize environmental and climate literacy with those values, not just to teach science, but to teach opportunity, to inspire a generation of young people. As we've seen through every economic revolution, whether it's the Industrial Revolution, the space revolution, the tech revolution, and now this one, which unlike those others, didn't have the imperative of a world system collapsing. And so teaching that generation of young people who will both live with the consequences and will be stuck with those, but also who can invent and counsel and create and dance and become therapists and teach our way into a greener future. And it's long been ignored, even misused and obliterated, as many people have said just now, out of a fear and love of the status quo, or worse yet, a lack of appreciation. So our campaign is about infusing education with science, but also inspiration and opportunity. We now have 450 million people signed on through their organization and many leaders. We even have the CEO of Microsoft telling us if we want inventors, if we want creative people, if we want to share in the green economy equitably, then we need to integrate in every subject climate literacy, education, and love of the earth. And lastly, we'll believe that sustainability means taking two parallel tracks in education. One is teaching the love of learning, because certainly Earthday believes in learning for learning's sake, and to teach values, but to teach science and facts, and perhaps most important, about the possibility each person has to sustain and save the planet in their own unique way, but not taking our responsibility, the individual responsibility, to its illogical conclusion, because we still need to make sure that every person on the planet has an opportunity and the right to question corporations and governments about where we're going. Because if things go the way we expect them to go, a handful of companies and a handful of countries will own the green economy and the green future. So have we been successful? We've learned a lot about new ways of teaching. It takes time to educate educators about why we need to teach this new way, why climate change should be central to our education. Many countries are starting to jump on board. Resistance is always about two things: commitment to the status quo, that fear that was just mentioned, and of course, money. And that applies to everything in life. So we expect it, of course, in education. It's a long road, but with the inspiration I'm feeling today, and with all these other efforts that we're hearing about, and the extraordinary opportunity that we have, and the close to 500 million, 500 million people that want us to go in this direction, we really believe that we cannot build a green future, a green economy that's equitable and fair without insisting that we're all given the opportunities to be inspired. And so I think that's what I've learned today, and certainly the direction and pathway I hope education for sustainability will take. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for this comes from the heart. What I've heard comes really from the heart. So thank you so much. We have a bit of time for questions, bit meaning 15 to 20 minutes for questions. So please, again, if you have questions, put them on the chat. I will start from my side with one to the speakers and to anybody who would like to answer, which is one about the process itself, because I've met many people, many in this room in particular, many people who recognize complexity and recognize that not as an issue, but as a characteristic of life. So in the end, recognizing we have to learn from life. Life is complex. If it wasn't complex, it wouldn't be life. It's not that it would be boring. It wouldn't be life at all. So, okay, we have that paradigm of life that we are, curiously enough, rediscovering, because we knew it from the very beginning, and it's so well embodied in indigenous cultures and in cultures which are still alive today. And modern science is struggling to recognize the characteristics of life after a bit of time, lost in rationalism. But the moment later, many people seem to think, okay, but let's design the plan to get out of the mess in 10 easy steps, as if we were able. So we recognize life and complexity in life, but a second later, we think linearly. We continue thinking linearly in, okay, but what future do we want? Let's design the future we want, and let's make the perfect plan to get there. Which, of course, said this way is contradictory. Everybody would recognize the contradiction, but in practical terms, it's not so easy to avoid, to escape the traps of that linear thinking, in particular when you need to convince funders, when you need to convince organizations to give, so that they give you money or resources to develop your ideas. And funders usually ask for a clear pathway and goals and KPIs and all that. How do you deal, you speakers and participants, how do you deal with this dilemma of we have to learn from life, but we still live in the modern world, a world separate from life and the linear way, the mechanistic way of thinking? How do we start thinking in a different way while we still think that way? That's a quote from Nora Bateson. Luis, go ahead.
Thank you, Carlos. And I would like to start thinking about this question about precisely, the future is emergent. So it means we have no idea what it's going to become.
Yeah.
And if that is so, any linear thinking makes no sense, as you say. But the path towards the emergent future can be seen. Like this is like crossing the San Francisco Bridge when there's a mist around it. Every step you take, you can see a little bit more of the bridge, but you have to step forward. So the question for me is not really, about the full predicament, but it's about the narrative. Is the narrative towards a destination, or is the narrative towards, let me rephrase that for a second. Is it about where I am right now, where we are as humanity, and where we need to go? Or is it about the direction we start moving and the speed of motion we generate towards a potentially emerging future? So what are the principles that guide motion, and how can we speed up motion so we can create more steps in that misty bridge in order for the emergent future to start realizing? But there has to be principles. And I think the regenerative framework really brings some principles of life to us to guide us. So I would say that if we can change the narrative in terms of how do we build bridges that are not permanent to move forward towards that emerging future. That's really where we need to put our energy to increase speed and align direction.
Yeah, thank you.
Many thanks, Luis. Many thanks.
Yeah,
John,
John,
sorry.
there is a question for, Carlos, there is a question for John in the chat. Can you talk more about how you're seeing positive momentum in your LEAP work and some principles we can take into our various work?
Well, I'll try to do that succinctly, but I just want to pick up on what Luis just said. I think the counter narrative has got to be creative, and we've got to create it all the time, and we've got to live the counter narrative and invite. And the invitation has got to develop, pique the interest and the curiosity. We've got to understand all human beings are curious, and we've got to awaken the curiosity by not. So sometimes, Carlos, when you ask the question, what's the process? A good way to start to get to the answer is, what is not the process? And I think we have been living what is not the process, using fear as a bludgeoning instrument to say, if we don't do this, you're all going to die, or you're going to drown, or you're going to lose your property, or whatever. That has never sparked a new civilization. The new civilization has to be an intrinsic process of discovering that I want something better for myself. And in that process, the counter narrative of, well, we're interconnected, we can do it together. We don't have to fight each other in order to stand on each other in order to get there. So in the LEAP context, to go to that, there are 4 basic elements to our work. One is we concentrate on metacognitively awakening children to understand their responsibility for their own inner work, the inner work of self, the inner work of answering your questions for yourself. So that's the starting point of our curriculum. The second part is they sit in the groups I told you about, and there they're interconnected and interdependent, and their responsibility is to reflect honestly with each other so that they can learn from each other. So they become the teachers. The peer group is the most powerful teacher with young people anyway. And then the third is take children and young people and old people into contexts where they can make a difference. Teach them the joy of that by letting them feel it. Don't tell them about it. Let them get their hands in the soil and plant. Let them visit the creche and play with the children. Let them read poetry to older people. Let's develop a generous spirit. So the generosity has to be part of the curriculum. And it's not one day when I'm rich or one day when I leave the community. It's what I'm able to do now as an agent of change. So triggering agency makes it so exciting. Our children love the idea that they can make a difference. They don't have to be taught that ever again. They know it. It's like riding a bicycle. And then mastery. Mastery is the one that unfortunately the colonial powers left as the priority in Africa. And now we're trying to undo that and go to the intuitive mind, connecting with the rational mind, but recognizing it starts with the intuitive mind. Bring the two together. The dialectic produces wise mind.
That's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Laureline, you wanted to add on?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one small idea. When Carlos asked this question, I was thinking what came up for me very strongly was this idea of trust. Like somehow we don't trust in our own abilities to really understand how nature works, to really connect with it, we don't trust our intuition, our ability to deal with our emotions on a daily basis. And same with the founders, like somehow they don't trust us. And that's why they need those like very elaborate plans that we need to produce in order to access some funding to do activities that they should see the value in, or that they should trust have values because they are rooted in regenerative principles, in living system design, in all of those, in these very strong foundations that we feel are necessary to burst this type of new world into being. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight this point.
Yeah, that's interesting, Lolin, because now there is an emergent trend in philanthropy speaking about trust-based philanthropy, which is something which in the present context that makes sense. But trust-based philanthropy, what is the meaning of philanthropy in the first place, you know? So how can you have a kind of philanthropy which is not trust-based, you know? So, but that's a reality. We have a question from Julia. Julia came about, should we focus on youth or also on adults? She says, do you feel the transformation, education, and inner work is more effective with youth, younger people than with adults? And this is a question initially for John, but any other speaker as well. What do you feel?
Well, the reason it's easier with youth is because you don't have to do the unlearning. The problem with me as an adult going through my painful change in this country, when I'm realizing I'm the problem and I'm part of the problem, is that I have to work against all the conditioning. So the beautiful thing about young people, the earlier you can begin to free the mind to be able to be fearless and to discover the authentic voice, that's liberation. I've taken 65 years to discover anything like an authentic voice. You know, it's so slow because I'm constantly measuring it against what I used to believe was true. So I think we have to work with both. I'm drawn to the young because it's so rewarding and there's so much the joy in the process and there's so much to celebrate, but there must be work done with the others so that we don't have this a generational gap that we all used to live with somewhere in our lives.
Yeah, could not agree more. We have to work with youth because it's the future by definition, and they're more plastic. But we have to work with all the others because they are blocking the system to evolve anyway. So, Luis Klein, you had a question or a comment, and then Luis Camargo.
Yes, thank you very much. Going back to the question that was raised around complexity and the linearity of the path, and as a resonance to the entire session, and I'm very much delighted to see where we are arriving now, is the question of our sense of agency. With that comes, is it the youth? Is it indigenous? Is it them? We sort of force our idea of agency upon to change the world? Or isn't it much more a question of rebalancing our sense of agency? As a hobby, I'm canoeing, and with a kayak, there is a point where you go over a dam. There's an eddy, a wave that turns backwards. If you're captured in that wave, the only thing to escape that eddy is to let go of everything. It draws you down to the bottom and spits you out on the other side. So the strongest, those who think they can do something about it, die in that eddy. Those who let go come out on the other side. But that's not the point. It's not letting go is one part of the equation, and going step by step, as Luis said it earlier, is the other part. And the wisdom is distinguishing the one from the other. And there comes, and that is my last remark to it, since we had the question, what's the meaning of philanthropy? Of course, the meaning of philanthropy is the love for humanity. And this is what we need to take into account. We heard that earlier. Fear disconnects, love connects. And to ease the question about the balance of agency is a good old, as we scientists say, the good old Turner question. What's love got to do with it? And if we raise that question just as a critical counterbalancing question of all towards our sense of agency, but also to all the things, be they lined up or intricately programmed and projectified, and ask that question, what's love got to do with it? We're certainly one step further on that San Francisco Bay Bridge that Luis earlier talked about. Thank you very much, and over to Luis.
Thank you, Luis. I wanted to touch quickly on one thing you said, and I think, you know, when you detach, the important issue is not to detach apathically, it's to detach empathically. Because detaching doesn't mean losing the capacity to hold love. It means the capacity to distance yourself from something. So I think empathic detachment is a concept that I invite you all to explore. It's been a key light bulb for me for many years in all my relations. But I wanted to answer the question related to the ages. I think obviously children are, as it was said, they don't have to unlearn. But at the same time, once we start working with reconnecting and deeply connecting and allowing the silence and the magic of nature to touch the self, adults have a great capacity to unlearn and shift. So I do think we cannot stop working with adults, and we really need to focus in creating experiences that allow them to connect with their innermost nature, because that's where they'll start opening their eyes to a different way of seeing the world, and allow children that are growing up with that different way of seeing the world to emerge and create new innovations. So we need to focus on changing narratives, changing hearts, and fostering regenerative capacities.
I could not agree more. And the change of narrative has been said several times already. And with eco-anxiety and the realization that, you know, fears are increasing everywhere, especially in the youth. So I think we are not done with the fear versus love question. Kathleen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, a couple of things weaving together the question of philanthropy and who should we be educating or inspiring or working with. And I think, you know, for the most part, the climate funders have been very skeptical about funding education in general. It's been that way for decades and maybe forever. Education is always at the end of most budgets in most countries and most communities. It's just a fact. And with the climate funders, they keep telling us that we don't have a generation to turn this around because we're presented every day with a shortened timetable when it's all over. You know, is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? And so the urgency and the need to change society, entire society, it seems to be predicated on the idea you can do it in a very short period of time. I think what I'm inspired here about is you know, the need to rethink it and revamp it. But I don't think after 50 years after Earth Day, when the whole thing was about inspiring people to take control and save the planet, that we're not seeing that materialize. And in part, it's driven by this incessant need to make all of us feel enormously guilty for everything we do. But that doesn't work. And everybody here has said exactly the same thing. If you really want to connect with nature, if you want to connect, if you want to figure out how to save the planet, you have to connect with love. You have to be inspired. And so I think, obviously, the older we get, the more wedded we are to the status quo. And children are such an open book, so malleable and trusting and easy to be impressed. So I think I would say it's a combination of both. But going back to the philanthropy is educating the philanthropists about the urgent need to take all of this and integrate it straight across education from pre-K through universities, because we need those. I'm going to need a psychiatrist by the time the scientists are done with me and the concerns about climate change, but certainly the next generation will need artists and therapists and business leaders and entrepreneurs and inventors. And so we actually need to address all of these issues. That's something we try to do at Earthday, and most of us on this call do the same thing. But we do need to educate the philanthropists and others about the need to invest a huge amount of resourcing resources, doing all the things that we talked about today.
Okay, we have a couple of hands. Just before I give the floor to Ash, on the argument of time, you know, we have no time to change learning. We have no time to change the way we think. I think it's a very misleading argument. Gandhi said, well, you know, speed is not relevant if you go in the wrong direction. So coming back to the argument of Luis that it is about what is the next step and what is the direction, etc. I think learning new ways of being in the world and learning new ways of thinking probably is the shortest path to address our challenges, and that's what some people don't see. But anyway, Ash, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I know we're quite short on time, but I'm at London Interdisciplinary School, which is a new institution focused on taking a different approach to education. So I think just one thing I wanted to sort of highlight from that is the role of higher education, particularly the formal approach, the formalizing alternative approaches. So what we're trying to do is create a curriculum which isn't based on disciplines or subjects, but is based on an interdisciplinary problem-based approach. So kind of building that in from the start. And I think I've heard a lot about schools and I've heard a lot about kind of non-formal education, but I just wanted to flag up that, you know, the higher education sector is also crucial in terms of rethinking how you approach what a degree is and how you get one. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that I just wanted to briefly mention in thinking about educating adults is song work. And this is something that I've been developing for a while, is to create what I call song work gatherings or song circles, in which song is used as a way of getting past that fear barrier and bringing people together in similar to the activity that we did at the beginning. We're thinking about our names, but using singing together as a way of breaking down those barriers and using it to separate out spaces for talking and then spaces for silent reflection or meditation of some sort, and then spaces for creating something together, but using song to introduce and open each of those circles. So that's something that started working with just in groups of friends, but have now started taking into conferences. First of all, initially with online conferences. We did a session with Learning Planet last year and with Catalyst 2030. But also now in face-to-face conferences as well. We had a song circle at Ecologists Across Borders. And it really just changes the energy in the room when you allow people to sing together. And it's something that I think has been very lost in Western culture and Western education. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in the mix as well. But LIS, London Interdisciplinary School, we're getting our students to work with real world organizations. And it will be interesting to see whether the organizations actually listen and whether they take the young people's recommendations seriously and actually implement them and learn from them. That's what I'm excited to find out, because it's new. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope they will. I hope the organizations will listen. We are getting close to the closing, sorry to say. So I know that there are some hands raised, but I have to give the floor back to Karima, who engaged us into experiencing humanity at the very beginning of the session, and now she might have some magic for us on reflecting and reconnecting. Karima, please.
Well, I would just reflect with you that what happened right now isn't that magic. We're talking about sustainability, and if we looked at what we've been sharing, we were basically talking about love, about connection, about compassion, about trusting. It's something that we all know, and a deep knowing of our hearts. It is there. But why do we get distracted by words that take our focus out of the path that takes us where we want to go, to that shared essence, to our humanity? Isn't it beautiful when we hear the word humanity? That it's an opening. we see beauty, we hear beauty when we hear humanity. Yet it's deeply what connects us, deeply what we are. So the question is, maybe as a last note, where everyone can just give a minute to reflect what has happened here, in the idea of how do we explore new ways of learning for sustainability, and maybe go the path that John was saying. And let's take the 4-way. Let's take the sustainability away. But what stays? What don't we take away? And if we're going to say learning for sustainability, what would be right now the first word that comes into mind? What would be the first thought that comes after this session? Knowing that hopefully that first thing that comes to mind will evolve as we go along and we recognize the melody of and the resonance of this beauty, which is the humanity that defines us and connects us. If I say learning for humanity, what comes to mind after hearing all these experiences?
You want us to answer in the chat, right?
Yes, thank you, Carlos. In the chat, if someone wants to talk, there's very few minutes left, but let's go in the chat, and please do share it also if someone feels that would like to.
Hi, this is Suresh. Can I speak for a few seconds? So I think many of you are talking about relationships, and I'm basically about 15 years ahead of all of you. I stopped doing physics research about relationships. I've done a lot of research work, so it's pretty broad. You can connect me with me on LinkedIn, Suresh Maran. I think from there we can connect and discuss many of the details of what we've been talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suresh. Suresh this morning did not know the meaning of his name, and now he knows it. Yes. So what learning for sustainability evokes for you now after this morning session and this session? Just to say what has happened today, what kind of learning has happened today, and what has it got to do with sustainability, and what comes here? I can read earlier. Louis Klein said love. The first word compassion, the meaning of my name, Karuna. So she's really connecting it to herself. Compassion for others, for other beings, for natural wealth, for everyone, for everything.
You're asking me?
No, I think I think she's. Yeah.
If there's the resonance to what learning for sustainability means, the first thoughts after hearing all this, hearing all these connections, learning to be. Yes.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Karima. I will.
Sorry, Carlos. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
Again. No. Taking safe space. For everyone to experience. Carlos, I got confused there.
Sorry, because you at some point I saw you frozen, Karima. So anyway, I think there are plenty in learning being present and active, says Roseanne. There are plenty of ingredients of response, of elements of response in the chat. Again, we will share the session with all of you and also the contents of the chat. And we're just to finish by making 3 remarks. One in response to a question by Alex Crawford about okay, what do we do with the people who are leaders? You know, I mean, can we move the lines without moving them, without engaging them into learning processes? I think we have to engage also with them for sure, but in new ways, not in the usual ways, and particularly not in the standard way, which is about stakeholders. No time left for being stakeholders, because all stakes are at risk. If we keep on defending our own stakes, you know, we will not shift to a new way of thinking and reconciliation with life. We might make some incremental improvements in the situation by by using these stakeholder engagement or stakeholder negotiations. But a very important matter is the leaders are also humans. Let's rediscover their humanity. Let's make them act and as humans, as people as people. And people need people is the format that Nora Bateson is developing in the context of the Worm Data Labs. So that's for one. There was another question about, okay, but when do we get practical? I mean, I'm slightly translating. So I just want to mention that this is an ongoing activity. So we have these sessions today, but together with the Learning Planet platform, the Club of Rome, we created several circles, a circle of learning for sustainability, and also an Ubuntu learning circle, which is both our ongoing activities. And the purpose is the process itself, and learn together how to enhance the process, how to take a step by step, one step at a time, but cross the bridge that Luis Camargo was talking about. So if you are interested in participating in these circles, which are ongoing activities, and we'll have more sessions during the year, please feel free to share with us your interest, and we will involve you as well. It's a movement, it's a process, and I cannot help finishing with a quote from one of the most impressive poets in Spanish language, Antonio Machado, who he wrote poetry in very simple manners, you know, with very accessible to anybody, but also producing deep wisdom with the simple words. And so everybody in Spain knows what I'm going to quote. Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Meaning, more or less in English, translating is always a treason. Walker, there is no way. One makes the way by walking. I think this is what we have done together in this session and the whole day and the whole week of this Learning Planet Festival, which is, let's remember, all about celebrating learning, celebrating process of learning and of learning together. So many thanks to all of you. Gael, I don't know if you will want to add a few words just to conclude and close the session.
Thank you, Carlos. So I wanted to thank you, all of you, for being here this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed that session. There is a lot more sessions in the festival, and the festival is on till Saturday. Maybe Ed, you can send in the chat the general program. There is more than 400 sessions, and so this festival is here to grow. This year is the third year only, and it has already reach that level. But next year and the years onward, we would love to have, I mean, if we have a dream to share, is that there would be important conversations connecting people about what is truly important in terms of learning all across the planet. This is not about the happy few on a Zoom link with it's about engaging the students, it's about engaging the teacher, it's about engaging everyone, because at the end of the day, sustainability is for all of us a topic. It's for all of us to be engaged, to learn, to see what is it that we can do, what is it that we can where we can heal, where we can learn, and so that process, and it's one session, but there's so many different sessions, that process of celebrating learning and learning what is it that we should learn or can learn or learn differently and unlearn. This is something that we would like to share and distribute. And so sharing that dream that in a few years from now, there will be a time in the year where everyone on the planet will be, frenetically sharing what is it that we want to learn, and saying, oh, this is the book that I loved, and this is the way that and this is the teacher that I got, and I recommend that and the other. So as a species, we have evolved to learn and collaborate to learn. That's where we are. And so back to your question, Anne, science is just the best way we can collaborate. This is the apex of collaboration and capitalizing knowledge. It's so bad that it's been used or misused, but it's so good that we can use it for different ways. So if we connect to ourselves, if we connect to others, if we connect to the planet, and if we learn how to take care of that, then the technology and the science can be used for the good. But it starts by being us better humans. And I think here today, this morning and this afternoon, I'm thrilled to be part of those discussions, because this is really how we can create those connections between people, between those ideas, that we can see together that there is a much brighter future. And it will work only if we collectively all get engaged into those conversations. So hope that you enjoyed. Please go on other sessions, and please get to know the program. Get in touch with us for next year, and I hope that next year we will have so many different festivals and places all over the world with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you particularly to Ed and all the people of the Learning Planet platform in the backstage. Who are not even recognized, but without them, without their work, and then therefore this session wouldn't have taken place and wouldn't have been the success it has been. I'm biased in saying this, but thank you, Ed, and the Learning Planet people. Bye. Take care.